Alright, so this is the third video in my How to Play Yu-Gi-Oh series, and for this video I will be going through extra deck monsters. So the first type of extra deck monster I want to cover is fusion monsters. So these are the oldest type of extra deck monsters, and most of these you need a fusion spell to summon them. The traditional one is polymerization. When you activate polymerization, you can send the fusion materials listed on the fusion monster from either your side of the field or your hand to the graveyard to special summon the fusion monster. So, for example, if you had one Blue Eyes White Dragon on the field and two in your hand, you can activate a polymerization, send all three from your field to the graveyard, and then special summon a Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. And then polymerization would also go to the graveyard. You can choose to summon your fusion monsters in either attack mode or defense mode. And then if this card leaves the field later, you can special summon it from the graveyard as you would any other monster after you summon it correctly through polymerization. Unless the card says on it that it cannot be special summoned through ways besides fusion summon. For example, Absolute Zero is one where it says that it must be fusion summoned and it cannot be special summoned through other ways. Speaking of Absolute Zero, there are some fusion cards, like Miracle Fusion, which have added benefits to use over polymerization. However, they are often limited in the number of monsters that they can summon. So Miracle Fusion, for example, can summon any elemental hero fusion monster. So you could not use it to summon Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon because it does not have elemental hero in its name, but you could use it to summon elemental hero Absolute Zero because it does say elemental hero in its name. So unlike polymerization, you can use Miracle Fusion to banish two of the correct materials from your graveyard instead of sending them from your hand or field to the grave. Fusion spells like this that summon the monsters in slightly different ways will say exactly how they summon it on the card itself. Finally, there are some fusion monsters that you can special summon from your extra deck without using a spell to summon them. These cards will say directly on the card how they are supposed to be special summoned. Ritual Beast Ulti Kanahawk is an example of one. To summon this, you need to have a Spiritual Beast monster and a Ritual Beast Tamer monster on the field, and then you would banish both and special summon Ulti Kanahawk from your extra deck. There are a few other fusion monsters that special summon themselves in similar ways, such as Gladiator Beasts, and these monsters will all say in their effect how they are supposed to be correctly summoned. The next type of extra deck monster I want to go over is Synchro Monsters. So, to summon a Synchro Monster, you need a tuner. So, it'll actually say on the card itself what you need to summon it. So, in the case of Stardust Dragon, you just need one tuner and one or more non-tuner monsters. So, a tuner will be something like Blackwing Gale the Whirlwind, and it'll actually say right there, tuner, right after it says Winged Beast. And there are lots of different tuner monsters that you can use. And to summon Stardust Dragon, which is level 8, you have to add up the levels to equal level 8. So Gale is 3, so if you add Cyber Dragon, which is 5, you get 8. So what you would do is, if you have both of these monsters in the field, you can send them to the graveyard, and then special summon Stardust Dragon from your extra deck. Once again, you can summon this in either attack mode or defense mode. Just like with fusion summons, if the monster is properly synchro summoned beforehand, you can later special summon it using a card effect, unless the monster explicitly says that it cannot be special summoned except by synchro summoning. Some synchro monsters will require you to use more than just two monsters. For example, with Stardust Dragon, you can use 2 monsters to make this, or you can use up to 5, potentially, as long as their levels add up to 8. With monsters like Trishula, you need at least 3 to make it. So Trishula requires 1 tuner and 2 or more non-tuner monsters. So to get the 9 levels that you need for Trishula, you would need to use 3 monsters. So in this example, we can use Gale, which gives us 3, Lila, which puts us up to 7, and then Auraiko, 2 more levels would make 9. So if you have these 3 monsters in the field face up, you can send them to the graveyard and then synchro summon your Trishula. And then additionally, some monsters will require even more specific monsters to summon. So a lot of times what they'll require is one tuner monster and then one tuner of a specific type, in this case spellcaster. Sometimes it'll also require light monsters, sometimes the tuner has to be something specific. You just have to read what the Synchro Monster says to find out what you need. So if we want to make Arcanite, that's level 7, we need a spellcaster to make it. So in this case we can use Lila as our spellcaster, because we can see here Lila is a spellcaster. That gives us 4 levels, and then Gale would give us the 3 more levels we need to make 7. So we could send these 2 from the field to the graveyard to synchro summon Arcanite Magician. The next type of extra deck monster I want to cover is Xyz Monsters. So Xyz Monsters are summoned using multiple monsters of the same level. So in this case, we need 2 level 4 monsters to summon Castel. So we could use a Reborn Tengu and a Lila. So once again, if we have these 2 monsters face up on the field, instead of sending them to the graveyard this time, however, we overlay them as Xyz materials and put them underneath Castel. So most Xyz monsters need to detach either 1 or more materials in order to activate their effects as cost. So to activate Castel's first effect, you need to detach 1 material, and to activate its second effect, you need to detach both materials. When materials are detached, they get sent to the graveyard. However, Xyz materials are a little weird. So Xyz materials do not count as monsters. There's a few situations where that comes up. So as soon as they become Xyz materials, they're no longer treated as monsters until they're in the graveyard again. Then they're once again treated as monsters. Additionally, monsters that are used as Xyz materials are never treated as leaving the field. So Xyz materials are not counted as being on the field, which is important for some situations. For example, Reborn Tengu, its effect is a trigger effect that activates whenever Reborn Tengu leaves the field. However, Reborn Tengu's effect will never activate if you use it as an Xyz material. Just like with Synchro and Fusion Monsters, you can choose to summon Xyz Monsters in attack mode or in defense mode. And once again, unless the monster says otherwise, you can use a card effect to special summon an Xyz monster after it has been properly Xyz summoned. However, when you do this, it will not have any materials attached to it, so it will likely not be able to use its effect in that situation. Just like with Synchros, there are some Xyz monsters that require more specific conditions. For example, Pleiades needs 2 level 5 light monsters. So Cyber Dragon is a light attribute. So if you have 2 Cyber Dragons in the field, you can overlay the 2 of them to summon a Pleiades. Additionally, there are a handful of Xyz monsters, such as Gaia Dragon the Thunder Charger, that you can Xyz summon by putting them on top of other Xyz monsters. In the case of Gaia Dragon, you can summon it by putting it on top of either a rank 5 or a rank 6 monster. So Pleiades is rank 5, so you can put Gaia Dragon on top of that to Xyz summon. The last thing I would like to note about Xyz monsters is Xyz monsters do not have levels, they have ranks. So you might notice that for other cards, they have the level on the right side of the card. However, Xyz Monsters is on the left side. This is intentional because Xyz Monsters are not treated as having a level. This is relevant for things such as synchro summons. So, for example, if you wanted to summon Stardust Dragon, you need 8 levels. If you had, for example, rank 5 Pleiades and a level 3 Gale on the field, you cannot use these 2 monsters to synchro summon Stardust Dragon because Pleiades does not have a level. So you cannot use Xyz monsters for synchro summons. If a card activates that would send a fusion, synchro, or Xyz monster back to either your deck or your hand, it will instead go to your extra deck because you cannot have extra deck monsters in either your hand or your main deck. The final cards I want to cover in this video are Pendulum cards. So these cards, unlike Fusions, Synchros, and Xyz, start the duel in the main deck. However, when a Pendulum card is sent from the field to the graveyard, instead of going to the graveyard, you put it on top of your extra deck face up. Normally your extra deck is face down, so your opponent cannot see the cards in it, but they can see all of the Pendulum monsters that you have in your extra deck. You can play Pendulum cards as monsters. For example, you can tribute summon Foucault Cannon because it's level 5. However, Foucault Cannon does not have any effects. Some Pendulum monsters are normal, so they're the yellowish color of normal monsters, and they do not have effects as monsters, while some of them are the orange color of effect monsters and would have effects as monsters. Still, even if it is a normal monster, it still typically will have an effect as a Pendulum spell, so you can choose to play it in your zone as a Pendulum spell, in which case it has whatever effect is written up here. So right here is the spell effect, and down here is the monster effect if the card has any. And right here is the Pendulum scale. So far all Pendulum cards have the same scale on both sides. You can choose to play your scale on either the right side or the left side, and they're both acceptable. To complete a Pendulum scale, you need 2 cards. You need a right scale and then another Pendulum spell in your left side. And to properly Pendulum summon, they have to be different levels. So this one is a 7, and as we saw earlier, Foucault Cannon is a 2. So what this means is when you have the 2 cards as Pendulum spells on opposite sides of the field, you can Pendulum summon monsters between levels 3 and 6 in this case. You can't summon the level that is equal to. You can only summon levels that are in between. So a Pendulum summon is a summon that you have once per turn, just like your normal summon. You can only conduct 1 a turn. When you Pendulum summon, you can summon as many monsters as you want from your hand, and also if you have any cards face up in your extra deck, any Pendulum monsters I should say, if they're in between the levels, so this is a 5, you can summon that as well. So you can summon up to 5 monsters this way at the same time. And as I was saying earlier, to get the Pendulum cards into your extra deck over here, they need to be sent from the field to the graveyard while they're either a monster or a spell. Both ways are acceptable. If it's sent from either your hand or deck to the graveyard, it is sent to the graveyard like any other monster instead of being sent to the extra deck. When you Pendulum summon, you can summon any number of the monsters in attack mode or defense mode or any combination of that. And these monsters are all being treated as summoned at once. So that wraps up all the topics I wanted to cover for my extra deck monsters. In the next video, I will be covering both spell and trap cards.